While doing research for this channel, I've noticed that a few all-time greats of the game have on their list of honours a rather curious little trophy. The likes of Zinedine Zidane, Alessandro Del Piero, Juan Román Riquelme, JJ Okocha, Frank Ribery, and Dion Dublin can all proudly claim to be winners of the illustrious UEFA Intertoto Cup. But what was this competition? Does it count as a real trophy, or was it just a glorified friendly? How did he qualify? Why was it discontinued? All these questions and more will be answered in this video. The Intertoto Cup began as the brainchild of Austrian former footballer Karl Rappan. As a player, he played in both the midfield and as a forward and had some moderate success, winning the Austrian League with Rapid Vienna and the Swiss League with Servette. It is as a manager though that Rappan has secured a place in footballing folklore. In order to counteract the widely used attacking WW system of the time, Rappan devised a formation and strategy which was known as the Swiss Bolt, whereby players would be expected to switch positions and roles depending on how the game was playing out. Often this would mean conceding possession in the midfield and dropping deep, with it being the first system to utilise a four-man defence, the so-called security bolt behind the other three defenders. Basically what we know as a sweeper today. This system was essentially the birth of counter-attacking football and brought some success to Rappan as manager of Switzerland, helping him to reach the quarter-finals of the World Cup in 1954. His tactics were adopted and adapted by Helenio Herrera, manager of Inter Milan, who used the libero or free man in defence to great effect to claim back-to-back European Cups in 64 and 65. While Rappan's system was effective, it was criticised for being complicated and producing dull football. Nevertheless, as the 50s rolled on, Rappan became more and more interested in creating a European league, where the continent's lesser-known teams could experience the thrill of competition. He teamed up with head of the Swiss FA Ernst Thommen and the chairman of Malmo Erik Persson, who all shared his dream. Thommen had other reasons to want to get the idea off the ground though, as he was the managing director of the Swiss football pools, a type of sports betting not dissimilar to a lottery. He had a vested interest in seeing such a competition run in the summer, to keep the pools ticking over while the regular football was on a break. Even the competition's eventual name, Intertoto, is derived from the German word for pools. Due to its overt link with gambling, UEFA, to whom it seemed to be a tournament created specifically to settle bets during the summer, wished not to dirty its hands with such an event and refused to run it. The three amigos claimed they did not need or want UEFA to run the cup, just to give it official approval, which they did. So in 1961, the first instalment of a new European Cup competition took place, under the moniker the International Football Cup. In keeping with their desire to give representation to teams who would have little chance of competing in a major tournament, clubs had to apply for entry and would be accepted providing they met several requirements, namely that they would not already be competing in another European competition during the upcoming season. This requirement was a key tenet of the tournament's philosophy and would remain throughout its many different iterations. It is why the Intertoto was nicknamed the Cup for the Cupless. The first 6 years of the competition followed a reasonably simple format. 32 teams were split into 8 groups of 4. These groups were further divided according to geography, with those clubs from the east of the continent going into the A section and those from the west into the B. The winners of each group would then advance to the knockout stage. Ajax were the first winners of the tournament, beating Feyenoord 4-2 in Amsterdam. And this is how the competition functioned, with only the amounts of teams competing fluctuating from year to year until 1967, when the difficulty in finding dates to play the knockout fixtures led to them being scrapped outright. From this point on, the Intertoto Cup was a confusing mess of a competition, where due to having no finals and only group stages, no real outright winner could be announced, meaning that depending on the amount of teams and groups that they had that year, up to 12 teams could say they had won. A sort of unofficial winner was chosen by whoever had the best record in the group stages. Due to the fact that it was played during the pre-season and required a commitment of 6 matches and had no real prize, no teams from the UK competed. This all changed in 1995 when Big Papa UEFA decided to take control of this glorified friendly tournament and offer the rather attractive incentive of 2 UEFA Cup places to the winners. Naturally, this necessitated the reintroduction of knockout rounds and finals. Nations were allocated places based on the UEFA coefficient. So in the 1995 contest, countries from France and Germany had 4 representatives and Hungary and Scotland only had 1. There were 60 teams duking it out in total, split into 12 groups of 5 who each played each other once. All of the winners and 4 of the best placed runners-up of each group would advance to the round of 16. The quarterfinals were normal, but the semis were essentially the finals, with the winners of their respective ties advancing to the first round proper of the UEFA Cup. In 1995, it was two French teams who triumphed, Strasbourg and Bordeaux, with the latter team going on to become a poster boy for what the Intertoto Cup could do for European clubs. A magical Bordeaux squad, boasting future World Cup winners Bigzent Lizarazu, Christophe Dugarry and Zinedine Zidane, made it all the way to the finals of the UEFA Cup, a competition they wouldn't even have been involved in had it not been for our friends the Intertoto. German giants Bayern Munich would bring an end to their fairytale run in the final, but it had been an inspirational journey to say the least. English teams, however, were not initially sold on the idea. Well, that's a supreme understatement. They hated it. The FA were not able to persuade a single eligible team to fill their 3 allocated places. The UEFA Cup spots on offer were apparently not enough to convince Premier League teams that it was worth the considerable time and effort during the pre-season. UEFA weren't having this disrespect, first fining the FA £50,000 for all unfilled slots and then threatening to ban English teams from the quote-unquote real European tournaments. Wimbledon, Sheffield Wednesday and Spurs were eventually scraped together and entered into the cup. The drama didn't stop there though, as Wimbledon and Spurs were unable to use their own stadiums for the home matches and fielded what were essentially reserve squads. They were punished for their behaviour as UEFA took away the Premier League's 4th UEFA Cup place due to the disrespect shown to their new competition. Although from this point on it was made possible for nations to forfeit their places, which several chose to do, for example in 1998 due to the World Cup. In 1996 an extra UEFA Cup place was added. This was far from the last of the changes that Europe's governing body would make. In 1998 the group stages were scrapped, with a system of 3 rounds of knockouts taking place before the quarter and semi-finals, with teams from higher coefficient nations joining in the 3rd round. And this is how things continued for 8 years. During this time, the recipients of the UEFA Cup places were dominated by teams from Europe's Big 5 leagues, with the likes of Lyon, Juventus, West Ham and Werder Bremen all winning the cup. This was in stark contrast to the period before UEFA took over, when the groups were won by teams from places like Hungary, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Poland, etc. And while no other teams were able to replicate Bordeaux' success, there were some who managed to make some fairly deep runs in the UEFA Cup. Teams like Lille, Hamburg SV and Marseille got to the round of 16. Malaga made the quarters in 2003 and Villarreal made it to the semis the following year. One of the major gripes levelled at the tournament was that it could derail and disrupt the season for many entrants, especially those that made the finals, as it added a bunch of games to the calendar which could end up taking their toll later in the season. In response to this, UEFA could point to the 04 edition of the Cup, where all 3 winners went off to have some of their best ever domestic campaigns, with Lille and Schalke qualifying for the Champions League directly from their league finishes and Villarreal entering at the 3rd qualifying round, which they won. To be fair, this season does appear to be the exception rather than the rule. In my mind, the format of the competition from 98 to 2005 was the best. It is a bit baffling to me when they changed the format again from 2006 onwards, although I do see why they did it, cutting it from 5 rounds to 3, with all 11 winners of that final round entering the UEFA Cup at the first round stage. Most football fans had a hard enough time wrapping their head around a tournament which had 3 winners, let alone 11. The competition, it seemed, had chosen to fully embrace their farcical nature. To their credit, UEFA did implement a system in which an outright winner would be crowned for the first time in nearly 40 years, and it would be whichever team made it the furthest in the UEFA Cup. In 06-07, Newcastle made it to the last 16, so they got the now infamous plaque, which UEFA had decided was appropriate to give the winners, meaning football fans have been granted the joy of this wonderful picture of a bemused Scott Parker holding up a glorified certificate pronouncing his team winners of the 2006 Intertoto Cup. This madness lasted for just 2 more seasons, as in 2007 UEFA announced their plans to scrap it from 2009 onwards. Newly elected UEFA president Michel Platini had bold plans to revamp the Champions League and rebrand and expand the UEFA Cup as the Europa League, which teams would qualify for directly based off their league position rather than having to go through the outdated, unloved and now unwanted Intertoto. Braga have the honour of being the last recipients of the illustrious certificate. So what then is the legacy of the Intertoto Cup? Primarily, it's one of pointless ridiculousness, from the wildly fluctuating numbers of entrants and a ludicrous amount of potential winners, to the insultingly small egg holder cup and NAF certificate. There was an overwhelming air of the absurd surrounding the tournament, which in my opinion can't in all seriousness be deemed a real European title. However, I reckon that supporters who watched their teams play in the cup got to see some cracking games, travelled to some really interesting interesting places and have some wonderful memories to cherish. And the sentiment of wanting to give teams who would otherwise not have a chance to taste the thrill of European competition the opportunity to do just that is unquestionably a noble one, and it is such a philosophy which lives on in a tournament like the Europa Conference League, which, whatever you may think of it, is the modern era's cup for the cupless.